Hi there. I'm Lelia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Now, today, I thought I'd share something with you that I read. Now, I think I read it on Facebook, but it got my attention because it was titled Go to Church Anyway. And here's how it read. I took this right from there. It says, if you're an addict trying to beat addiction, if you're having sex before marriage, if you were out drinking all night the night before, if you aren't sure what gender you prefer, if you can't quit that disgusting habit you have, no matter what it is, go to church anyway. Church. Church is a hospital. They say it's a hospital for the broken, the lost, the empty, the confused, the desperate, and the rejected. And I thought when they said go to church anyway, that's just a wonderful open arm invitation to anybody and everybody. And once it described the church as a hospital, I thought that was wonderful for the broken, the lost. Well, everybody at one time or another has been broken or lost, feeling empty, get confused, they're desperate and rejected. And the hospital is like their sanctuary. The church is the hospital that is a safe haven for recovery. But before we even get into the story of the day, let's identify the areas and the harm that they can cause. First of all, addiction. It says if you're an addict, well, an addiction is a compulsive need for something or the use of something on a consistent, continuous basis. Examples. We all know examples. Ga- Gambling, smoking, porn, sex, drinking. And what about shopaholics? Shopaholics, that's an addiction. People that just go out and shop and just buy stuff they don't need, or they buy something and don't have nowhere to put it. I mean, it doesn't matter. And what about hoarders? HOARD? People that just have stuff stacked up in this room and stacked up in that room, and half of them don't know where it is, don't know what's in there. And they've showed that on TV, the hoarders. And when you go into the house, it's like you're just walking to a cluttered space with a little bit of pathway for you to walk through the room. That's what hoarders do. But that, again, is an addiction. Now, some of the harm that any of these addictions can cause. It can cause, like it said, the hospital is for the broken, the lost, the empty, the confused. All right, let's start with the broken. So many people we see every day on the street or whatever, they're broken. Why? Because their life has been shattered. It's been disrupted by a change and they can't get themselves together. They're damaged. They're damaged. And what about the people that are lost? Lost simply means you could be lost mentally, you could be destroyed, overlooked. I mean, and you feel not appreciated. And they just kind of, you ever see people on the street that look like they're just spaced out? They're lost. They're empty. That's the next word, empty. What does empty mean? It means void of. It means you have an absence of something and there's a space there. It means you're lacking in meaning, having a meaningful life, and you're lacking feeling like you're valuable. And that makes you feel empty because it is absence of something or someone that's no longer there. Well, confused, we know that means totally perplexed. You're just totally discombobulated. What we say is, oh, they're all mixed up. And that's the best way to describe confused. And then there's the desperate. It creates a desperate person, someone who's lost hope, someone who's suffering an extreme need or extreme anxiety. And what about rejection? We know, I'm sure that many of you, as well as myself, have experienced rejection at one time or another. Having lost hope about something, or you just feel not wanted, you feel like you're unsatisfactory, you feel like you've been refused. And they put that in the dictionary under rejected, and it says as a spouse or a partner. When they tell you negative things, you feel rejected, a cast off, and even they said repel or rebuff, and they use that in the terms of parents to their children. You ever hear somebody saying, well, you just like so and so, or why can't you be like so and so? Look at you. You ain't worth nothing. You a waste of time. They talk them down as children so much that they actually believe it. And everything we've mentioned here, and that's not all, but that's just some of the stuff, causes tears. Which brings me to my title for today's lesson, which is Tears Can Be Bitter, Better, or a Blessing. Now, it all depends on why you're shedding your tears. Now, let's talk about bitter tears first, because bitter tears, and I know we've all experienced it one way or another, but bitter tears usually comes from negative things, unhappy things, challenges that we face, like loss of a loved one, loss of a job, a friend, pets. You know how many people consider the pets their kids? You hear it all the time. But guess what? They spend a lot of time talking to their pets. Their pets are their family, and that's important. So, of course, that's a negative. That will bring tears, just like anything else. Just like harsh words can bring tears, and especially from somebody we really care for. But the bitter tears, in turn, can sometimes bring angry tears. And that'll cause us to say or do things that we wouldn't normally do under normal circumstances. Bitter tears can turn into hateful tears. And that can cause what? Hostility and resentment. Now, I thought about the bitter tears, and it reminded me of the story about Lazarus. Now, remember, Lazarus was very sick and he was dying, and his sisters sent for Jesus. He was somewhere else, but they sent the messenger, go get Jesus and tell him to come right away because Lazarus is sick. But if he hurries, he can save him. But Jesus didn't come till 4 days later. So you know what that meant. And through their tears, they were angry. Now their bitterness turned to anger with him. And they were scolding Jesus, saying, you should have come when we called for you. You could have saved him. Now it's too late. But we all know Jesus went to the tomb, had him roll the stone away, and he stood there And he said, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus walked out of the tomb. That only says one thing: it's never too late for God. Jesus already knew what he could do whenever he got there. So he was finishing up what he was doing because he knew he could bring Lazarus back anyway. They didn't know it. They're not supposed to know it. They all been out of shape scolding him, and he let them scold him because he didn't care, because he already knew what he was capable of. But that made their tears turn to a blessing. Tears of joy. They went from bitter to better to the blessing. And I like that because that gives an analogy of them going from one phase to the other. And like it says in Revelations 21:4, it says, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, sorrow, or crying. Now, the next sample I wanted to use, I thought would be good, would be the life of Ruth. And I know I spoke about this maybe last year sometime or whatever, but it was about the hardships that she and her mother-in-law, Naomi, had encountered. Now, Naomi had lost her husband and both her sons, one of which Ruth was married to. So Ruth lost her husband. So both women were shedding bitter tears together. But since Ruth was from Moab and Naomi had decided she was going back to her homeland in Bethlehem, she told Ruth, well, you might as well go back to your mother's house. I'm going back to my home, which of course Ruth had no idea what it was like in her home because she was from Bethlehem and Ruth was a Moab. But Ruth said, now let's go to the book of Ruth because I want to read exactly how this goes. Ruth said, and let's go to verse 16. Ruth said, she's talking to Naomi, and she said, I entreat, don't ask me is what it means. Please don't ask me to leave you. Don't ask me to return from following after you, because whether you go wherever, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge, and thy people shall be my people, and thy God shall be my God. And where thou diest, will I die, and there will I be buried. Now, to entreat, that simply means she was asking her, please don't ask me to go back to my home. And once Naomi actually saw that Ruth wasn't going back, she was not going to leave her, she didn't speak about it anymore. She just said, okay, come on. But the whole point there was they both had bitter tears to share. Now, Ruth was willing to give up her own home, her homeland, which was Moab, her whole way of life, just to stay with her mother-in-law, to comfort her, to take care of her. She was willing to do whatever it took to stop Naomi's grief. So they went on to Bethlehem, but as they were entering Bethlehem, people recognized Naomi, and they were saying to each other, isn't that Naomi over there? Now, let's go to verse 20, because this is her entering Bethlehem. And when she does, when she sees the people, she's saying to them, Don't call me Naomi. This is verse 20. Call me Mara, because the Almighty have dealt very bitterly with me. She's saying God has dealt bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord had brought me home again empty. So why then do you call me Naomi, when seeing the Lord have testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? Now, what does that mean? That's simply saying that Ruth felt that God was punishing her because of her when she went to Moab with her husband and her two boys. She took up a whole different religion. She started practicing and worshiping the false gods, because that's what they did in Moab. And that's why in verse 21, she was saying she went out full, because she went out with a husband. She went out with two sons. When she left Bethlehem, she had a husband and two sons. She was full. She had a whole family. But now she's coming back to her hometown with no sons and no husband. Now she's empty. And we did say that emptiness was one of the harms that bitter tears could bring, an absence of content. And her content were her sons and her husband. So now let's go to so then let me see what happened. She went I lost my place. Okay. So they went to Moab. Here we go. I went from Moab, I'm sorry, into Bethlehem. Now, Naomi's husband had land and everything and a house there. So when they got there, it wasn't like they didn't have any place to go, but they didn't have any money. But make a long story short, um, they had a house. It needed repair, but Naomi's husband, he had relatives there, and one of them was Boaz. One of them was Boaz, and he was a mighty and wealthy man. But even though she and Ruth had little money, Ruth said, "Well, I'm going to go out to the fields, and I'm going to glean in the fields after the reapers." And her hope was, if she could glean behind the reapers are the ones that cut the wheat with the sickle, and she was getting the leftovers. But she was trying to hope that she would end up on a field that belonged to Boaz, because he was related to Ruth through marriage. So soon she was hoping Boaz would come and see her, and he did. Soon he did come to his field, and he asked his servant, "Well, who's that over there?" And she said, "It's the Moab damsel that came back with Naomi." Now let's look at the second chapter of Ruth, because that's where we find out what happens now that she's actually on the field. And verse 8, it says, "So Boaz, he went over to Ruth, and he said, 'Hear this, go not to glean at any other field. Don't go from this place. Abide here by my maidens. And let thine eyes be on the field that they reap, and go after them.' And I told my men that they should not touch," I mean, not bother you, just leave her alone. "I told them not to bother you. And if you get thirsty, go onto the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn." And she fell on her face, and she bowed her head to the ground, and she said unto Boaz, "Why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou should take knowledge of me?" Why are you paying me attention when I am a stranger here? But Boaz answered her and said, "It has been fully shown to me all that you have done unto your mother in law since the death of her husband and yours, and how you have left your own mother, your own father, and your land of nativity, where you were born and raised, and come unto a people who you don't even know." He just saw the goodness in Ruth. He saw the goodness in her and he approved. And he said, "The Lord recompenses thy work." That means he's paying her back for being the good person that she is. A full reward be given to you of the Lord. And so that's how she got to be in his good graces. And she said, "Well, I pray you have favor in your sight, for you have comforted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly unto me, even though I'm not one of your handmaidens." So she was appreciative, and he was approving and showing her favor because of what he saw in how she treated Naomi and how she had given up her whole life, her family, and everything for her mother in law. And he invited her to dinner at his house. And she actually sat beside the reapers. So the next day, Boaz told the men, "Now you let her glean among the reapers." Now she doesn't even have to go behind them. Now he wants her to glean right beside them, with them. He says, "And don't scold her." That means don't make her go away. Don't say nothing. Let her do what she wants right there beside you. And that was in, let me go to verse 16. Let's see, verse 16. And that's when he said, "Let fall," that means drop some of handfuls on purpose for her, and leave them, that she may glean them, and rebuke her not. In other words, you leave some extra down there for her, and don't say anything to her. You leave her alone and let her do her own gleaning right there where they were. So she was getting the good treatment. So the next day, once he let them do that, he said, "And don't bother her." So so then Ruth, after she had gleaned, she took all this stuff home, and and Naomi had asked her. She said, "Well, where have you been that you got all this wheat?" And she said, "Well, I got it off of Boaz's field." And Naomi was like, "Oh my gosh." So she said she was really thankful, Naomi, and she said, "Blessed be he of the Lord," meaning Boaz, "who has not left off his kindness to the living nor to the dead." Because what she was saying, bless him for being so kind to us, the living, as well as our husbands, the dead, in memory of them. And so, thanks to Boaz, now Ruth stayed with his men and his maidens until the whole end of the barley festa. So when the barley season was over, let's see what happens next. And now we're going to go to chapter 4, because now we're going to fast forward a little bit. And so as time went on, Boaz, he became very interested in Ruth. He was very fond of her. He appreciated her for what she was doing, and how she was doing it. So he wanted her for his wife, because he wasn't married. He never found anybody he wanted to marry until he saw the qualities in Ruth. But the custom back then was the oldest relative of the deceased had the first option. Now, Naomi was married to his brother. So she's next of kin. So anybody that wants to buy anything that that person has, they have to go through a process. And the oldest living relative gets first preference. So that meant that the first option would have to go to Neb, who was Naomi's husband's brother. So he was Boaz's uncle. And since Naomi had inherited everything from her husband Amalek, she had a whole lot to sell because she had all kinds of property, land, and land was a good thing. Land was a good thing. So let me see. Let's go now to chapter 4. So Boaz, he had to give his uncle first dibs on the option to buy. But the catch there was, like it says in verse 5 and 6, Boaz says, well, now you can buy the fields, but at the same time, he's going to have to buy Ruth. He's going to have to buy Ruth because that comes with the package. Now Neb is getting upset because he says in verse 6, he said, I can't do that. I can't redeem it for myself because that'll make me mar, means to damage or mess up his own inheritance. So, because he would have to buy Ruth and that would mess up his inheritance. So he says, you buy her because I can't. You can't, I can't do that because I don't want to mess up my own inheritance. So now this is the manner in which they had to do this. Anything that was concerning, redeeming anything, exchanging anything, buying anything, all that kind of stuff had to be confirmed. And the man that was doing the switch there was like a contract, but the contract meant that the man, meaning the uncle, he had to take off his shoe and give it to his neighbor as this is the testimony for sealing the deal. And he said to Boaz, he said, buy it for yourself. So he took off his shoe and he gave it. And Boaz said unto the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Amalek's and all that was his two sons, Chilton and Mahlon, from the hands of Naomi. Now they're his witnesses, and all the people and all the elders, and they said, we are witnesses. So he didn't mind buying Ruth because he wanted to marry her anyway. So he still got what he wanted. So now this shows that, how do I say it? The bitter tears are getting even better for Ruth and Naomi because now they lost loved ones, but they're getting new loved ones. But the tears are now got better because their lives became more meaningful. Ruth got a lifelong commitment gave a lifelong commitment to Naomi. Boaz showed Ruth kindness when he saw what she gave up. And all three of them gave a lifelong commitment, loyalty, and trust to God. And in return, the blessings they received. Look at this. Ruth found the true God, a wonderful husband, and had a son. Boaz received a loving wife he thought he would never find and had a son. And Naomi, she really won out with a blessing because she has now another loving family again, a grandson. His name was Obed. And the women of the town said to her, he, meaning the baby, he shall be unto thee the restorer of your life and the nourisher of your old age. because Ruth loved her so much. Now she's giving you a grandson. And Naomi was well taken care of for the rest of her life. Why? Because they all believed and trusted in God. And this shows that bitter tears can get better and turn into blessings. And that's just what we have to do. We have to pray, have lifelong commitment, loyalty, and trust in God. After all, all saints have a past, just like every sinner has a future. And my closing words for today are: the Bible says there will come a time when tears will fall, not because of your troubles, but because God has answered your prayers. Until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.